Good morning. Oh, you can do better than that. Good morning. Thank you. You've driven through sleet and rain and snow to get here. We really, really appreciate it. So, I want to welcome everybody to the third Biennial New England Women's Policy Conference. If you were here with us in 2014, right in this spot, or 2016, welcome back. If you're a first-time attendee, welcome. If you're a young women leader in the Ignite track, special welcome to you, young women, upcoming leaders. We need the next generation. So we're very excited to have you all here. I want to say thank you to a few people and then try to set the stage with a bit of context. There's too many people to thank by name, but just a few thank yous. First of all, to our amazing planning committee representing all 6 New England states. We have women's commissions and women's funds from all over New England, so thank you to them. I want to give a special thank you to Denise Schultz, who you'll hear from shortly. As the founding director of the New England Women's Policy Initiative, I could not be more honored or humbled to pass the torch to Denise. She is an amazing leader. Not only is she a member of the leadership team of our center, but she is an elected school committee member. She walks the walk and talks the talk. And not only that, she is an alumna of our graduate certificate program in gender leadership and public policy, where we prepare women to be leaders in the public and nonprofit sectors. So she is the embodiment of our program and an amazing leader of this effort. Thank you, Denise. I want to give a special shout out to our friends and partners at the John F. Kennedy Library and Museum. James Roth, who you'll hear from in a minute, Deputy Director, Stephen Rothstein, who's Stephen, where's Stephen? Raise your hand. Executive Director of the John F. Kennedy Foundation. And a wonderful surprise this morning, the new Director of the Library, Alan Price, has joined us. And so we're looking forward to continuing our partnership with all 3 of you. You've been wonderful partners since 2014, and I urge everybody to open their program book and just look at the inside cover, where you will see that John F. Kennedy was the first and the only president of the United States to ever establish a commission on women and to really look at the public policies that women needed. And he did this with Eleanor Roosevelt, a heroine to, I'm sure, many of us in this room. But anyway, I think it makes it very fitting for us to be here. And then I would also like to thank 2 leaders at UMass Boston, Katherine Newman, our interim chancellor, and David Cash, dean of the McCormick Graduate School. You cannot build a regional policy program and event without the support of key institutional leaders. I want to thank you, Chancellor Newman, for your scholarship on many of the issues that we're going to be talking about today. Your books, one of whom I've taught, on low-wage workers, I think had just set the stage for a very important national conversation. And Dean Cash, thank you for your years of service in state government. You help us believe and that state government really is a vehicle for change, and that's what everybody in this room is all about. So thank you both, Chancellor Newman and Dean Cash, for your support and inspiration. So I just want to take a few minutes to reflect on this historical moment that we find ourselves in as we begin the conference. This is both a very exciting moment in U.S. history and a very challenging moment. And I think we have 2 tasks today. First, we're here to celebrate women candidates and campaign workers and leaders at every level of state government and grassroots organizing. And second, we're here to engage in policy discussions, to weigh complicated policy options, to consider how to draft legislation, build broad policy coalitions, get policies that will benefit women and their families actually enacted into law. So it's an exciting moment we're seeing because we're seeing an unprecedented rise in the number of women who are running for elective office and who won elective office. But we're also seeing an unprecedented rise in people whose names we don't know, who are just out there and involved. I'd like to ask, could you please stand if either you have been a candidate since 2016 or you worked on somebody's campaign? Wow. All right, keep standing, keep standing. Please stand if you are thinking that you might run for office in the future. Don't keep standing. Okay. And third, please stand if you went to a Women's March event or any related event following. All right, I think we've got the whole room standing up here. Fabulous, fabulous. Okay. So women are on the move. Women's leadership is on the rise. We are sending diverse women to Congress. We're very proud from New England, for example, to be sending Ayanna Pressley, the first African-American woman to ever be a part of the Massachusetts congressional delegation, and Johanna Hayes, the first African-American woman in the Connecticut delegation. On the state level, we have over 950 women that ran for statewide office or state legislature. That's not even going down into the local level. Over 950 women, and we'll be honoring them at the end of the program. There have been increases in women's representation in the state legislatures by about 4 or 5%. And that may not sound like a big number, but when you have been stalled, as we have in Massachusetts since 1993, 4% is huge. So this is progress. We are moving in the right direction. It is also a challenging moment, as I said, because we have a level of polarization in our political system that we've never seen before, at least that I would say I have never seen in my lifetime. We have attacks on women, on people of color, on immigrants, on LGBTQ people, people of different religious faiths. We have attacks on our free press. We have immigrant children separated from parents at the border. And we have suppression of the right to vote, such a fundamental part of our democracy. So we must respond with new policy initiatives to protect our civil rights and to pursue economic justice, which is really the theme of this conference. We must roll up our sleeves. Let's make today a very productive policy discussion. Let's get to work. So in closing, thank you for joining us to celebrate the recent advances in women's public leadership, and thank you for engaging in a collective process of creating public policies that will serve women, their families, and all Americans. Thank you very much.
Please welcome James Roth, Deputy Director, John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum.
Good morning. I'm James Roth, Deputy Director of the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. And on behalf of Alan Price, the new director of the library, I'm so thankful that he's here, and all my library and foundation colleagues, I want to welcome you to this wonderful New England day. I'm actually very surprised and very happily surprised that there are so many people here today. Sometimes when we have this type of weather, the numbers drop off, but you are all very, very intrepid travelers, so thank you for coming. And it is truly our pleasure to host you here at the Kennedy Library and Museum because we attempt to look at what's happening in our country and the world around us through the lens of John F. Kennedy. And the challenges of the Kennedy era come to life through our archives, our museum, our website, and in our many education and public programs. Through these resources, many are inspired to better examine and reflect on the crises and opportunities of our time. One such resource are the records of the President's Commission on the Status of Women, as Ann mentioned earlier. While President Kennedy did establish the commission, it was Esther Peterson, Assistant Secretary of Labor for Women's Affairs, who first suggested the President's Commission. Ms. Peterson and a few of her staff members developed the idea and made a formal recommendation to the President in June of 1961. Chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt, members included educators, writers, leaders of women's organizations, union leaders, 5 cabinet members, and members of both houses of Congress. The commission examined discrimination against women and ways to eliminate it. It studied legislation and services that would help women more easily fulfill their roles, whether as housewives, workers, or citizens, and the commission's work gave impetus to legislative and executive actions. For instance, it recommended the executive order, which included women in the requirement for equal employment opportunity under federal contracts. In 1963, the President signed the Equal Pay Act, which had been endorsed by the Commission. The Commission advocated changes in state laws that excluded women from jury service, from owning property or businesses, or from legal control of their own earnings. Within a few years, every state had established its own commission on the status of women. And the Commission also made recommendations to the private sector on issues such as daycare, access to education, and wages. While this is just a very brief overview of the impact of the Commission, I hope it helps to inspire, give context, and illuminate your discussions today. So thank you and welcome to the library.
Please welcome Katherine Newman, Interim Chancellor, University of Massachusetts, Boston.
Thank you so much, colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. Let me start by asking you, how many of you recognize the name Molly Orshansky? Anybody out there know who Molly Orshansky was? Molly Orshansky was an economist and statistician who in the 1960s was the first person to define the poverty line, the federal poverty line. She is a giant in the history of American social policy, and we wouldn't be able to talk about the issues you're going to consider today if it weren't for the work that Molly Orshansky did in the 1960s. So as Anne pointed out, there is a very long history of women's leadership at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level in defining the very issues that bring you here today. And let us remember that issues like poverty matter to everyone. Men, women, families, children, they engulf the entire society we live in. And they define the issues of our day, which are predominantly inequality and disinvestment in public institutions that are the lifeblood of a free nation. And you are here today to help us understand and to foment opportunities to change that landscape. And there has never been a more important time to do so. Because despite the extraordinary electoral victories, and I congratulate all of you out there who were responsible for them, there is an enormous agenda to achieve. We have never had a greater level of inequality in the United States than we do right now. Nonetheless, there are some important opportunities on the horizon, and I just want to put this in front of you as I do all audiences when I get a chance these days. We are headed into a period of labor scarcity. There is never a better moment, ever in the history of the country, than periods of labor shortages to address the very issues that bring you here today. It is the point at which you can achieve a greater degree of pay equity. It is the period in which people of color, young men in particular, can move into the labor market and find opportunity because there is a shorter list of people out there for employers to choose from. So let's recognize that despite the complexities of what we face, this is going to be a golden moment, especially for the people that we're training here at UMass Boston, which is a majority-minority institution serving the labor market of the city of Boston, and I couldn't be more excited about what we're going to be able to do for them in this upcoming period. That will be ever more true because we have an extraordinary mayor at the helm, who has offered visionary ideas about how to protect our waterfront, who has been absolutely instrumental in making women's issues at the forefront of the city's concerns. He is accompanied, of course, by all of the elected officials who are here today, from district attorneys to incoming congresswomen. It's an extraordinary time to have this crew on deck to attack the issues that I've been talking about. and that your conference is organized too. My own scholarship has been focused on these issues for the better part of 30 years. I have been tracking the fate of low-wage workers in an unequal economy, especially in Harlem, but also here in Massachusetts, all throughout that period. And what I can tell you is this: the vast majority of poor people in the United States work for a living. They just earn too little money to pull above the poverty line. And that is truly the question of our moment when it comes to poverty. It's not about welfare, it's not about benefit programs, it's really about wages and what it is we can do to enable people who are in the labor market, first to secure a place, to secure the hours they need to be effective, and then to keep moving up that ladder. There is no shame in entering the labor market at the bottom rung, there's a shame in being stuck there. So we need you to help us figure out how that ladder of opportunity can proceed for every American of all colors. These are the central issues that preoccupy my colleagues, Ann Bookman and all others involved in the New England Women's Policy Initiative and our center, which Dean David Cash has been responsible for helping to flourish. I'm extremely proud to be associated with a university that has made such landmark efforts to place these issues at the front of the agenda, the policy agenda. I'm really delighted to introduce and welcome Mayor Walsh, a longtime friend of UMass Boston. He is the first mayor to establish an Office of Women's Advancement, which recognizes the struggles and the need for support of Boston's working women. His personal attachment to these issues is what we really are here to celebrate this morning. It has led to groundbreaking achievements of a hard legislative nature, on pay equity, on salary negotiations. For our students, the mayor's office is an opportunity to engage in internships that lead them to career opportunities, that lead them to those elected officials' positions that all of you represent. So we are looking forward to working with the mayor and to having more opportunities to make sure that this extraordinary campus, UMass Boston, becomes or continues to be the engine of human capital of all kinds, but especially our young women, for the city of Boston and for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Thank you so much for attending.
Chancellor, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing. I want to thank Ann Bookman as well for your great work on the Center for Women in Politics. Congratulations, and I have two graduates I have more than two graduates, but Joyce Lenahan, who is my Chief of Policy, went here into the program, and also when I was a state representative, I had Marianne McHugh, who went through the program, and actually a bunch of people in my office, and Marianne now is the head of intergovernmental relations for the Mass Nurses Association, so thank you for that. We also are joined this morning by Tanya Del Rio, who is the director of our Office of Women's Advancement, who is going to be leading a panel. I don't know if she's in the hall or outside, but I know she's somewhere, right there. There she is. Thank you, Tanya. But I want to thank you all. And I want to thank everyone for being here and welcome to Boston. As was already said, we have a beautiful Boston day today. I'm not too happy about the snow. It costs about $1 million for every time it snows in Boston with plowing. But it's here, and we'll get over it, and it'll be gone later on today. We have a heat wave coming this afternoon, 44 degrees. So those of you that are not from Boston area, from the south, if anyone's here, you'll enjoy the heat wave later on today. I want to thank UMass Boston on their leadership, particularly on many issues in our city. UMass Boston is one of two public universities in the city of Boston. The other one's the Mass College of Art. But the issues that UMass Boston tackles are very important to what we're talking about today, and they've done that for decades here in the city. The university shows the promise of higher education, and it's been certainly an engine of opportunity for working class students here in the city of Boston and working class people here in the city of Boston. It's where, as I mentioned, many women have launched their own public careers by coming to this campus. In the city of Boston, we have made gender equity and women's advancement major priorities in the administration. We've dug into this work to lead true culture shifts throughout the city, throughout our own city hall, our own organization, and throughout the region. I've been proud to put my full support behind the work, both as a man and as a mayor, in what we're doing. Women are leading key departments throughout the city, from the chief financial officer, the chief of housing, and so many other departments that we have in city government. It's about a lot more, though, than numbers. It's about amplifying women's voices and making sure that that happens. It's about making sure that we have a sense of diversity and the perspective at the table and at every table when we talk about issues and people that can make important decisions. This is especially important work when we talk about closing the gender wage gap. When I heard of when we were talking about President Kennedy starting the Women's Commission back in the 60s, that was must have been an incredible time when that happened. When I became the mayor, we started talking about closing pay equity, and we had been talking about it since the 60s. And we've been filing legislation since the 60s. And we've been talking about it since the 60s. And we filed more legislation, and we talked about this is going to be how we're going to do that. When I became the mayor, I thought there was a real opportunity here with Joyce Lenahan and other folks around me that we can make a real difference. It's about time that we stop talking. So when I got elected 5 years ago, I worked alongside the Women's Workforce Council and Bosch University. We published a historic report that shows exactly how big the problem is here in the city of Boston, that women are underrepresented and underpaid in our workforce. We knew that, but we took that report to see exactly where the gaps are, where the problems are. It was the first in the nation using real wage data, self-reporting by businesses in the greater Boston area. We worked with businesses, and we got about 200 businesses to give us the information of their wages in their companies, women compared to men. And we looked at that. It was anonymous information. And we represented about 16% of the greater Boston workforce. About $14 billion of earning was the data that we looked at. It showed a 24% wage gap for women in Boston. And the numbers are even lower when you look at Black and Latino women. So right there, we knew there was a problem. We said, okay, there is. We called on Boston employers to do something about it. So 200 businesses signed on to the 100% Talent Compact. They've committed to wage data and adopting best practices to retain and promote people from within their companies. I ask you, if you work in the Boston area organizations, ask your employer if they're part of this conversation. We're not going to take names. We're not going to take information. We're going to be looking at the wage data to see exactly where the shortfalls are so we continue to move forward. We're also working directly with employees. We created something that's called the Free Salary Negotiation Workshops. And so far, we've empowered over 8,000 women to ask for equal pay for equal work. I was going to an event one time in Boston, and a woman got on the elevator, and she looked at me, and she said, I want to thank you for the salary negotiation workshop. I'm like, oh, you're welcome. And she explained to me that when she got the job, because of going through the training, she was able to get $15,000 more for her job because she was able to negotiate a higher wage. The UMass Boston Center for Women in Politics and Policy studied the data. They find 90% of the women who attend these workshops took some kind of immediate action. They're using their skills and getting raises that they deserve. We've developed a model in how this is working. Other cities across the country are asking us for this information because the word is spreading. So I'm asking you, today you can grab Tanya or a whole bunch of folks that are here from the city and ask them how this began and how we can help other cities across America. This is hard work, but nothing happens overnight. But change is happening. We're chipping away at the culture that systematically undervalues women's work. We're also taking real action to address persistent logistic barriers facing women and their families, like childcare. We know that it's especially tough for women in low-wage jobs and single moms. Our Office of Women Advancement and our Economic Mobility Lab are working together to understand the effects of working women. The city's Director of Women's Advancement, Tanya Del Rio, is here, and she's going to be talking at 2:30. She's going to be moderating a panel called Policy Solutions for Low-Wage Workers, which focuses on fair scheduling challenges for workers and their families. You're going to have an impactful discussion today about this and many topics. My hope is that leaders here in Boston and New England are able to share their best practices that they've experienced and work together to solve real regional challenges. I just want to also say that thank you for your involvement in the political process. And don't be afraid to run. Don't be afraid to put your name on the ballot. I grew up literally a mile from this building. When I was a kid, we'd come to this library, and I would see that President Kennedy was a Boston guy. And I grew up in an Irish Catholic family. My mother and father are immigrants from Ireland. And public service was in my blood. And I remember when the first opportunity presented itself to me to run for state representative. And it's a tough decision. It's a tough decision that first day, and I thought to myself, I knew I wanted to run, but I didn't know if I was going to run. And when I went to City Hall and pulled the papers, that day I knew it was the right thing for me. Win or lose, you elevate the conversation. You are able to push agenda items. You're able to move forward. Only a handful of people win. It's not about winning or losing. It's about elevating the conversations and having those dialogues throughout the entire country. And that's what we need right now. It's not about the elections, and sometimes it is about the results, obviously, last week in Congress. But it's about having the dialogues and the conversations so that we don't start something and then never talk of it again. So again, I want to thank all of you for being here today. I want to thank you for being part of this important conference and these important conversations that you're going to have today, and enjoy Boston.
Please welcome Denise Schultz, Director, New England Women's Policy Initiative.
Good morning. It's so wonderful to see this room full of activists and advocates here today from all over New England. Thank you for braving the weather and showing up. It's going to be a great day, and I'm really excited. Thank you, Mayor Walsh, for your wonderful remarks talking about what the city of Boston is doing. Part of why we bring this convening together is to best practice share what's happening across New England. We have some great examples going on in Boston. We have other examples in New England, and that's why we're here today. So thank you. I wanted to really get up here to recognize our planning committee this morning. We would not be here today without the wonderful intellect of our planning committee members. So I wanted to ask our planning committee if they could stand up so I could recognize them. And I'm going to embarrass them by calling out their names. We have Jill Ashton from the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women. Amy Gallant from Maine, the Permanent Commission on the Status of Women in Maine. Marianne Moore, also from the Permanent Commission on the Status of Women in Maine, who come almost from the Canadian border to join us today. Kelly Nevins from the Women's Fund of Rhode Island. Carrie Brown from the Vermont Commission on Women, also another long drive, so thank you. And we have Mary Lee Kiernan from the Connecticut's Permanent Commission, the Permanent Commission on the Status of Women in Connecticut, Inc. And is Carolyn here? Carolyn's not here. And then I'd also want to acknowledge our new state, a new national partner for us this year. We're super excited to have partnered with Ignite. So we have Amy Zuccaro, who's their Chief Resource Officer, and Sarah Guillermo, over here. Sarah, I'm embarrassing you. Say hello. Sarah has also been a part of our planning committee. So I just really wanted to center these wonderful women. We would not be here today without their 11 and a half months of contributions to get us to where we're at. So thank you. I did also want to just recognize two members of my staff that have been incredibly helpful, and I wanted to give them some recognition. Jennifer Vivar Wong, who is going to join us later on today. She has been one of my program assistants, and Denise Moreau, who's out there doing speaker check-in, has also been invaluable to me today.